The first 100 days back at work after parental leave are almost as important as the first 100 days are for a new CEO. Most new mums and dads feel that they have to prove they didn't lose their brains when they gained a baby. So why are those first 100 days so important, and why is it so important to create a first 100 days plan? Well, without structure, it's very easy for those first few months to go by in an unfocused flash. Our first 100-day plan tool is a hugely effective structure that thousands of the managers we've worked with have found incredibly useful. In fact, I'd go so far as to say, if there's only one thing that you do to prepare for your colleague's return, have it be this. Don't write it for them, but working with the individual to create a concrete first 100-day plan will provide you both with a framework to help decide priorities. It will prompt their thinking prior to coming back, and it will help them set realistic goals. It will also get them realizing that it does take time to settle back and that that's normal. A 100-day plan gives direction to those first months back and makes sure that there are clear objectives and gives you an opportunity as the manager to define your expectations and have some input there. It's a good basis to discuss things like how they see themselves working once they're back in the office, what they want to achieve early on and what their priorities are, their slightly longer term career goals and development, as well as a development plan for them for the first few months. So how's this first 100-day plan structured? Well, there are 3 stages. The first stage is reintegration, and that's day 1 to 30. That's all about making sure that they're getting back up to speed, connecting with key contacts with the team, and really getting very clear on what their objectives going forwards are. The second stage is re-establish, and that's day 30 to 60. The focus of this period is all about navigating quick wins, getting those confidence-boosting successes under the belt. It's also time to connect with the second tier contacts that they won't have had a chance to do as a priority in that first stage. The third stage, move ahead. That's day 60 to 100, and it's really all about delivering and planning for the year ahead and really making sure that things are working going forwards. Each stage breaks down into 5 further sub-areas to consider. One is awareness and context, so that's around how they're going to get up to speed. One is around the line manager, so what's the involvement with you going to be, and what's going to be needed across the 100 days. Another area is visibility, making a plan for getting back on people's radar, and along with that, networking and role models, reconnecting with their network, realizing that they might need to network a bit differently now in order to fit in with their parental commitments, perhaps finding other parents in the business who can support them and share tips. And finally, there's a what next column, which is an open prompt really for any other considerations. What I'd recommend is that both you and they fix monthly check-ins after each stage so that you can be really prepared and stay quite on top of what's working well and what might need adjusting. Do bear in mind that if your colleague is going through our working parent coaching program themselves, they'll also have been introduced to this first 100-day plan. So check in with them in order that you can both plan it together. What key things should you consider then when you're pulling this first 100-day plan together? Well, certainly what's changed in the organisation and the team since the person's been away. On an individual level, what's changed? Perhaps that might be working patterns or their boundaries, and what the current priorities are for the role. Perhaps it's moved on quite a lot since they've been away. What's in scope, what's not, and think also about how their work is going to ramp up. Who do they need to communicate with? And overall, how can this return period support their career goals? Keep an eye out for common pitfalls and make sure that you're helping your employee see and, where possible, avoid them. These can include things like assuming that things are going to be exactly the same as they were before, having unrealistic expectations, perhaps basing their actions on wrong assumptions, and that's often linked in turn to not asking enough questions and not listening enough, sometimes because they feel that they really should know because they have been in the business before, yet they haven't been there for a while. Although you must follow the individual's lead in terms of the level of contact that they want to have with you while they're on leave, if you are in contact with them, and definitely without pressurizing them, Encourage them to use this Plan Your First 100 Days interactive tool, even if it's just an initial draft. They might want to start with meeting you or maybe a key team member or two whilst they're still on leave, if they do feel ready for that. Keep it quite limited unless they particularly want more, and of course keep taking their lead on it. Develop the plan in time-based stages. So if it's all a bit overwhelming for them to consider 100 days all in one go, just focus on what you both want the first 30 days to look like for now, and then plan to tackle the rest after their return. Remember, if it just isn't the right timing for them to be writing this plan while they're on leave, then you can always create it together in the first week or two back. Encourage them to break their plan down into the key subject areas and for each to set clear actions and achievable goals. Less really is more. Be clear about exactly which 100 days you're measuring to, whether that's calendar days or working weeks, or if they're going to be working part-time, the first 100 days that they're actually working. There's no right or wrong way of doing it, but do bear in mind that the point of the tool is to give focus, so make sure that the time period doesn't drag on too much, is all I would say. But most of all, just make sure that you're both referring to the same time period when you talk about 100 days in order to avoid confusion down the line. Remember that this plan is inevitably going to develop and perhaps change over time, so review it and amend it at regular intervals to ensure it's always relevant, and put prompts in your diary to remind you to do that. So what are the problems that you might encounter if you don't do this step of creating a 100-day plan? Well, without one, there can be a real lack of focus. Having a 100-day plan also gives the opportunity for the individual to register some quick wins, which will be really confidence boosting for them. So conversely, if there's not an 100-day plan present, the returner can end up feeling like they're not achieving or contributing quickly enough. Planning the first 100 days can look like a really large task, but break it down and your employee will really benefit from having done it, and they'll feel much better prepared and more engaged when they do return.